Welcome to FemLead, the podcast on female leadership and role models. This show aims to inspire and equip you with the tools you need to navigate your career plans. FemLead brings inspiring career perspectives and strategies to guide your path to success. Your host, Alexandra, will interview role models on new, exciting topics with each episode. If you like what you hear, give us a review and subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of FemLead Podcast. Yes, we have a new season and we have new exciting guests here today. But on top of that, we also have new partnerships and new events coming up. So if you're listening now, I encourage you to go on our website and find out all the news of our future collaborations and current events that we're planning. And if you are based in Copenhagen, join us. And if you are not based in Copenhagen, sign up for our email newsletter where we share updates, career advice, and also we let you know about upcoming interviews and podcasts that will inspire you for your career planning. We are super excited that we get to do this and our team is growing. So I want to take a few moments to thank the team for doing an incredible work. I think you've all noticed on social media that we are trying to create better and more relevant content for you. And when it comes to our collaborations, we are really trying to find a match between all of our different initiatives that will really enhance and help in your career. For the past year, we have had some pretty cool partners and we want to continue this collaboration. So if you listen and you work for a company that think would benefit from collaborating with us, also feel free to reach out to us at hello@femleadpodcast.com. Now that I've done my promo, I'm very excited to be welcoming our next guest. She's a role model for me. I've been following her online for a few years now, and I am super excited to be having a conversation with Chisom Udeze finally here at FemLead Podcast. Chisom is an economist, a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategist, 3 times founder of impact-driven companies, and she has over 14 years of experience working with organizations such as the European Commission, the United Nations, ExxonMobil, and the Economist Group. Chisom is analytical and a data enthusiast and has lived and worked in 7 countries across 3 continents. And if you hear her describe herself, she would say that she's highly adaptable to different circumstances and people and thrives in uncertain environments. If you hear this interview, you will notice that is very much true. So I look very much forward to presenting the interview. She is the founder of Diversify and Diversify Consult, and her team works with companies, institutions, government, and the civil society to develop sustainable DEIB strategies, that stands for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and measurable diversity and inclusion initiatives in the workplace and in society. In 2022, Diversify launched Diversify Nordics Summit, the largest conference in the Nordics that gathers cross-sectoral stakeholders to amplify DEIB initiatives in the Nordics and beyond. In 2020, she founded Her Space, a diverse and inclusive co-creation community for all genders, with particular focus on the women and non-binary people. In 2022, Her Space launched her Tech, Women in Tech Incubator for women-led companies with a focus on the inclusion of diverse founders. Chisom is a thought leader in the DEIB space. She's a passionate advocate for mental health and wellness. She writes often on these subjects and also justice-related topics, and some of her work is published on Forbes. As I mentioned, Chisom is really a role model for me. I really hope that you'll take the time to listen to this really cool interview with her and check out all of the updates that she shares as well. Enjoy this interview. Hello, Chisom. Welcome to FemLead Podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you here today. Finally, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Really glad to be here.
I already mentioned in the introduction that you've been my role model for a few years now. I've been following you for a couple of years, really thinking that you are a role model in our community, but also really an activist and a person that does what they mention and what they say they will do. And I really wanted to spotlight that because I think us having this chat is going to be a great opportunity to talk about purpose-driven work and missions that are larger than life, but at the same time really impact communities. So I'm very excited that we get to do this today. And I know that I've mentioned you have a couple of hats that you wear in your professional life. So I wanted to start by maybe telling us a little bit about your current professional setup and maybe share a little bit about some of those hats that you wear every day.
Thank you. I just wanted to say it's really humbling to be here and really humbling to hear that you think of me as a role model. I think it's always, I feel very humbled and I guess out of words, which is not very frequently that I don't have much to say. So thank you. To your question about kind of like the hats that I wear, uh, um, perhaps I should define it into two main things. The first being that I work as an economist and I work with different organizations across the world to do, like research, project assessment, monitoring and evaluation, investment analysis. And then I have the hat that I wear that I am more known for from a Nordic perspective, where I am a founder of three organizations / companies, Diversify Consult, and Herspace. So I guess I can talk a little bit about Diversify. It's a nonprofit organization that works to amplify diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in workplaces and societies as a whole. And we often use a justice and intersectional lens in the work that we do. In this capacity, we engage. We try to engage in meaningful dialogue and, speak truth to power where necessary. And we also collaborate with organizations across the Nordics to do this. And of course, there's a Diversify Consult, which is more or less a horizontal that's spun out of Diversify, where we focus it on doing, strategy, implementation, data, measurement work for workplaces that are looking to be more inclusive. And then, of course, there's Herspace, which is a community, co-creation community for women, non-binary folk, and everyone in general, but we do focus a lot of our initiatives on professional development, mental health and wellness, community building. I guess basically all of this to say is I started with Diversify. It wasn't a planned, process of I want to start a company, but then it turned out to be a bit more. And then, I get ideas or something that I see is missing that I personally need, I create. So I guess the nuance for my founder's story or journey is that I create things that I need. And luckily, it has resonated with a lot of other people.
That's a really story I can resonate with, because I also didn't think that FemLead would necessarily become so much of its own community when I started the podcast during the first lockdown in the pandemic. It was really something I wanted to do because I felt the need to have this sort of space to promote role models, and I learned a lot myself from it, of course. And then at some point it grows, and then you kind of need to let it be its own thing and grow a community around it. So I think we both have a lot of learnings from that journey, and a lot of, I would say, advice that we could give to other people that consider starting a community-driven organization. What are the challenges and what are the very cool pieces of advice that come out of it. But before we deep dive into that, I would be curious to know, when you reflect on your career, how is it that you describe your progression? Because I'm sure that you didn't come up with the Diversify concept in, I don't know, the first year after uni. You probably had your own, career experiences that made you think that this is a great idea to work towards. How would you describe your career progression?
Thanks for that. It's not often I reflect on how I got here, but when I got out of university, first my bachelor's, I worked for about 2 years in New York in the nonprofit sector. So I guess I've always been, in some sense, committed to, like inclusion, justice work, and also with a strong focus on the global south. So I did work, of course, always leveraging my skill sets in finance, business, and economics. And after that, I did my postgraduate studies, and then I was a lecturer at university in the Netherlands. And did that for a little bit, decided, I love academia, but I, of course, want to do more around industry. So I went back and forth from the oil and gas sector to, the finance sector. and eventually kind of settled in the finance sector. So if I have to think about my career progression, I think I have taken a path that was expected up until I founded Diversify. Before I founded Diversify, my mother and I founded a secondary school in Nigeria. So that was really my first journey into like creating something that was big, that was impactful. But I've also kind of come from the perspective of my mom is a successful entrepreneur. So watching her grow her businesses has been some of the best learnings for me. And then when I came to Norway, Diversify, like this is why I still explain like I do two things, where I still have the job that pays me. And then I have the job that I bleed for, that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I want to see something happen. So with Diversify, it was something that I just saw that was missing, and conversations that were not being had, and spaces that was not created. And being the stubborn person that I am, I figured, hey, I'm going to do something about this. And then that something became, I need to do more about this, and I need to do more about this, and I need to do more, right? So I think on one hand, my career progression continues to go on the same path as, my mother would approve of, and then there's the other part, where I do all this work, oftentimes, unpaid, but because it's something I'm passionate about. So it's a balancing act, I think, for me. It's a balancing act. I'm still working through it.
Absolutely. All of it, it's a journey, and it doesn't really end when you reach a certain position or role or join a certain organization. I think that's something that now, navigating through my career path as well, I realize how much pressure I put on myself on figuring out a specific role position, because I thought that once I'm there, I'll know what to do, and I'll know exactly how the rest of my career will look like, or what it should feel like. But the truth is that the more you learn, the less you know, and the more you kind of want to find out about, other instances, other topics, other fields. And then you realize that, it's actually endless journey of finding yourself, creating good synergies in teams. And in that regard, I think, having leadership skills and kind of seeing yourself as someone who can connect the dots and lead a team, or inspire a team rather, it's very important. And I feel like from what you've shared, you must have some strong leadership skills to consider, one, that you want to do both a career and a passion career at the same time, because that's a big choice, and it's a conscious choice you've done years ago. And then also, you've reached a level of success that it's something that, if people look at your profile or if they hear you speak, they say, oh, wow, Chisom did it, and she's, a role model for so many communities. What do you think are the skills that make a good leader, and how would you think that those skills helped you in reaching to where you are now?
Yeah, I think leadership is a work in progress. I'm quite a curious person, and one of the things that I love to do the most is to learn, and not just learn new things, but unlearn the things that I think I knew. There's nothing more exciting to me than like, oh my gosh, I've been getting that wrong for like how many years? Oh my gosh. I get so excited in, okay, how can I process this? How can I unpack this? I think for me, leadership is also about following. You cannot lead without being willing to follow the people that you lead, to listen to them, to meet them where they are, to understand what they are trying to tell you, or understand the individual, so you know how best to work with them to make them feel like, okay, she sees me, she hears me, and I am a part of whatever it is we're trying to build. I think leadership requires humility. And I have, and it's also important to say, like, I've made mistakes, like in my, and sometimes I still make mistakes, but not as big as I used to make in the beginning. But I've made mistakes, and I think leadership is about being humble, and creating a space where the people that you lead also see you as a human, as a person that makes mistakes, because you have to model the behavior that you want to see, right? And from a lot of my team, I learned so much from them because they come from completely different backgrounds and perspectives, So for me, I'm not sitting there thinking I'm your leader, so you have to do what I say. I'm like, I can lead this team, but I cannot lead this team without your leadership, right? Without your trust. I think leadership as well also require the ability uh, um, to connect authentically. And that also means in how you show up. I'm not interested in painting this rosy picture of what it is to be a leader. And also, I'm not trying to be another leader. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. I have a lot to manage. Some days I have a crappy day. I don't want to show up and be like, no, everything is under control. Some days I show up to my team and I say, folks, I'm struggling. I need your help. And if I'm having a bad day, I make that clear. So for me, I think leadership is being authentic. It's being honest. It's been vulnerable. It's being humble in how we do this work, and always being willing to learn.
That sounds really inspiring, and at the same time really challenging for the way that we thought we can reach success. And it's a bit of an interesting discussion to have, because we hear a lot of leaders and thought leaders. Everybody talks about Brené Brown's books and how she talks about being vulnerable, but how many times do you see that in practice, especially in organizations that have maybe they have modeled a certain way of seeing career progression and what a leader should behave like or stand up to and so on. Change is very uncomfortable for some people and some groups that have been used to a certain way of doing things. And I wanted to ask you, because you've had a lot of experiences and you've also lived in multiple countries and seen also this cultural, let's say, way of adapting to how different leaders behave. What do you think then it's like the greatest lesson in leadership when it comes to becoming a good leader? Because you've mentioned a couple of things, but if you were to choose one that you would see as the piece of advice for people listening, what would that be?
That's a hard question, choosing one. Maybe I can just frame it in a sentence and maybe explain it a little bit. As a leader, as a person, you don't know what you don't know, right? And being able to recognize that means that you understand that you don't know everything. Your way is not the only way to get something done. Your culture is not the dominant one, right? It's not the norm. And we need to be able to listen, to understand, not to respond, right? So for me, I always enter any room, even with my employees, from the mindset of, I don't know what I don't know. And that humbles me. And that allows me to be open, to be able to learn, and also to dismantle the ideas that I come in with. We all have the biases we come in with, like what is professional? What type of leadership does it take to succeed? We need to smash all of those, because you have to be the leader that your organization needs. You have to be the leader that the people in the organization needs to help them thrive, right? The type of leadership, I've been a leader in the finance sector. The type of leader I was there is completely different from the leader I am in my nonprofit organization. So you have to adapt to the context and the people that you work with or you engage with. But for me, it always starts from, I don't know what I don't know. And that humbles me.
That's a very good reflection. Thank you for that. It's, I think it takes a certain career, well, actually not only career perspective, but it takes a certain level of maturity and understanding that what we think as leaders is not the only way. And we have, we are basically some way we are in debt of wanting to know more from someone else so we can become better leaders as well.
Absolutely.
And that's something that it's a good reflection. And I'm sure when our listeners are thinking about it, they're like, hey, it makes sense. But putting it into practice and seeing it happening in front of you, it's a whole different dimension. And I really applaud leaders that show up and say, I don't know everything, so I'm happy I'm here with you so I can learn from you. That's really something that I personally feel very inspired by as well.
I think as well, like leaders should think about when they had a leader or when they were being led, like what did they want to be? What did they like? What did they not like? You know, even for me, I reflect back to university. One of my classes, I had this teacher, you know, one of those professors who they're notorious for not wanting to give anyone A's in the class. And I was notorious for always wanting to make A's, right? So, you know, teacher comes into class and goes, no one in this class, like 2 people in this class will make an A. Like 10 people will make a B and the rest of you will be between a C and a D. And that always infuriated me because you were deciding ahead of time how we can succeed, what we can reach. So when I became a teacher, when I became a lecturer at university, I had no interest in being that. You know, so I walked into class and I said, I really hope everyone here makes an A because I absolutely believe that that is possible. And what is my role in making them understand the context, the topic, and also giving them that, that encouragement that you can succeed, you can thrive. I don't want to be like a badass leader. Excuse my French. Not sure if I'm allowed to say that in this podcast, but you know, I don't want to be like a leader that is feared. You know, I want to respect the people I work with, and you know, it's reciprocal. So if I respect them, they will also respect me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's challenging when you don't see people around you doing it, which is why having role models, it's really key. And I feel like, you know, even this discussion, talking openly about these topics is something that I rarely see in certain environments, you know, professional environments. And then when I discuss it, I realize so many people have thought about it or want to talk about it. It's just that it's not a topic that you would normally bring up. So I'm super happy that we get to do this and that we both have some experiences to share that are relevant. It happened to me, especially this summer, that I had some chats and people were like, yeah, I would be curious to know about this, but I don't have where to ask it. So it's a very good opportunity that we also get. And thinking of how you just described your setup at work when you have a full-time job, but also you are a thought leader in your daily life. Everything you share, it's followed and it's being questioned, challenged, but also a source of inspiration. And people, you know, they show up to your conference, your events, they want to be part of your incubator, and women reach out saying, I want to be mentored or inspired by your community. How does that play into your, you know, how do you balance your daily life with having to have your full-time job and professional career that you want to continue to build up on, and also be a thought leader in your everyday life?
Sometimes with difficulty. Like it's not easy, you know, and I'm not, I don't want to be that person who's just like, yeah, it's a breeze. And then when people are trying to do it and you're struggling, you're just like, how the heck, you know, like I manage it sometimes with difficulty and sometimes with ease. It comes down to planning. You know, if I'm in a good, you know, flow and I'm able to plan how I want to manage, you know, my work, my advocacy, you know, also as an employer. Like it's something that I have to think about. And they also interact with my home identity as a mother, as a partner. I still have to figure out in all of that, I have to feed my kid. Right? You know, she needs to take a shower. She needs to be prepared for school the next day. So the balancing act is difficult sometimes, but I try my best to plan and also to be kind to myself. You know, in my earlier days in this journey, I used to always be very, like, it's so easy for me to be kind to others, you know, and understand their situation. And then I just put the most ridiculous pressure on myself So it's unlearning that I need to put so much pressure on myself, understanding that, okay, I can't do it all, but when I show up, I need to show up authentically. And also prioritization, it's an act, right? It's like for me, I need to figure out what is most important for me to do in this week, in this situation. I guess what I'm trying to nuance here is that for me, it changes depending on the week, depending on the month, depending on what is going on in my life. For me as a person, I always like to say it's very important that I also nuance that I have anxiety, right? And for me, it's very important for me to manage my anxiety so I don't have like a panic attack or like, an outbreak of some kind. So it's also in checking in with myself and saying, okay, how am I feeling right now? And what can I let go? What can I ask for help with? So asking for help is a big part. And what can I focus on to get done? So I guess maybe all of this says it's a balancing act as well. I don't have a clear format or framework that works every time, but it's just in planning, prioritization, and asking for help.
Yeah, those are three very good takeaways for anybody who's considering how to balance different passion projects with their career path themselves. Because I also feel that I have my own career aspiration while building a community, and like you said, it's a balancing act. So sometimes I'm more motivated, sometimes I'm less motivated, and sometimes I'm more interested in seeing what the opportunities are. And at the same time, there are days where I'm just, I have a difficult project at work. I just want to finish it and I can't think about something else. So it's very much a matter of, like you said, planning and being kind to yourself, that you don't need to work at 150% every day and manage to go through everything at the end of the week. It's a very good reflection.
It's not possible to work at. It's all realistic,
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not.
Absolutely. When you meet senior leaders and, considering your profile and also, what you stand up for, what is your speech and how do you wrap what you work on and what your passion is with what we should all be striving for? Because I feel like sometimes you can be in situations where, people are curious. But what is basically your aim when you have these interactions with senior leaders and they do ask about your passion or what your goal is with Diversify? What is it that we should all be aware of when we are in these sort of interactions?
We all have a responsibility in creating an inclusive world. And that responsibility is not to be tossed off to somebody else. We do operate in a system and a structure that currently is not inclusive of a lot of people. There are many ways that I have privilege because, for example, I am cisgendered and a straight woman, right? Whereas others whom I identify, say, for example, as trans, or non-binary, might not have the same privileges that I do. If we are intentional about learning and understanding how we can remove barriers for everybody, or for the most marginalized groups of people, we can actually remove barriers for everybody else. So for me, my main goal one of the core reasons why I started Diversify was to contribute to a world where we all felt a sense of belonging. Imagine how amazing that would be. That each and every one of us, no matter how different we are, our different intersectionalities and identities, that we can walk into a room and go, I'm home. It's so and sometimes when I'm not having a great day or I'm discouraged, I'm just like, this will never happen. But then most of the time, I know in my heart of my heart that this is possible, but it requires each and every one of us to contribute to it. So we all have power, to varying degrees, but we all have power to show up and to create this sense of inclusion in the world that we want to see.
Definitely. What do you then do when you have to handle difficult conversations? What is your advice to people that find themselves in difficult conversations? And I'm not talking only about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but also in general when you are in a conflictual setup where you need to handle something that maybe you're not ready for. How do you How do you go around that?
I think one of the best things that I have learned to do, I do it like 93% of the time, 7% of the time. Sometimes I'm caught off guard and I react. But one of the things I always say is take a pause, right? Like pause. And that pause could be, I need a week, I need a day, or give me 30 seconds to think about this. I take a pause and then I check in with how I'm feeling. And then I start with asking questions, right? Like I have had some of the most profound aha moments with my 3.5-year-old because her favorite word is why, 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 why. And then by the time she's done, I feel, I'm exhausted, right? So I think in handling difficult conversation is also recognizing, maybe reframing difficult conversations, because I think sometimes we hear difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations, and we're just like, oh my gosh, no, take me away from this now. I don't want to deal with it. And especially when you come from, say, cultures, like a lot of Nordic cultures are very conflict shy as well. So instead of dealing with things, let's ignore that it's happening and just like focus on like the butterflies and the blue skies, right? So for me, I think about reframing it to necessary conversation, right? It's not just difficult, it's not just uncomfortable, it is necessary. And that reframe is really important for me to approach that conversation with empathy, with humility, with compassion and curiosity, but at the same time, knowing where I need to stand my ground, knowing I need to like create a boundary and say, this is a line we're not going to cross, right? So for me, it's like navigating all of these feelings and needs and giving the other person the benefit of a doubt and saying, why, Alexandra? And why? Right? And how? And asking questions from that perspective. But, I've also been in situations where I froze and I went home and I thought about all the amazing things that I should have said that I did not say, or sometimes I've also reacted out of passion and emotion, and I did not get the results that I would have wanted out of that conversation. Luckily, a part of having difficult conversation is it doesn't need to be finalized right now. I can reflect, go back and say, okay, what is my responsibility here? Where can I apologize? What can you learn from this? What can I learn from this, right? So, but the first thing is take a pause.
Yeah. I wonder how many of us think about that when we're in the midst of a very, let's say, emotional wave of, it's not easy. So that's why practicing that and looking at the meditation practices and other ways of handling emotional waves, it's actually super important. And it makes you a better person to, also be around. So people want to come and tell you, hey, I want to say something that you might not like.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just a quick practical tip. So if you take, for example, receiving an email that upset you or a text message that upset you, type up all the angry things you want to say, but then don't send it and check back in an hour and see if you still feel the same way, or check back the next day, or have somebody else you trust read it, right? Because sometimes I respond to things, like where I've been triggered. And then, my husband, he's like super calm, talks like this, like anytime it takes him to say a sentence, I've said like 10, and I have him read it. And he's like, well, you don't have to say this. Do you have to say that? And I think that is one practical way I manage, because I think I'm a very fiery person, like I'm shy. A lot of people don't think so, but I'm very fiery. And I'm very passionate, right? So I use stronger words to articulate what I feel or what I think. So it's in just taking that step back and going, I've written what I feel, it's out, but do they need to read it like this? What do I want to get out of this, right?
A very good tip on handling your own setup and not letting it become something that's not, because you should also have the time to reflect.
Yes.
But like you said, you shouldn't just send everything that you think the other person should know, because at the end of the day, this is also an exercise for you. It's not necessarily something that you want people to receive as a message. You maybe want to say something, but the way you send it and the way it's received is very different. So it's a very good reflection on doing that. I'll be curious to know, as we approach the final 5 fire questions, what is the biggest surprise of your career?
Ooh,
so far.
Biggest surprise. I think everything I've kind of created with Diversify, and especially since it was not planned, I'm a planner. I plan everything. I plan everything. It also helps me manage anxiety, because once I have control about what I do, it helps. But I think maybe surprise, but also expectation of how big I can dream, and how I intentionally set dreams and goals that scared the heck out of me, and I am so grateful for the stomach to handle the stress. I think that has been the biggest surprise, but also in the things that I have learned. There's so many things that when I started my career, I was like, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to say that. And now I'm just like, Chisom, never say never, So I think I'm surprised as to how humble I have become, and I love it. And I want to be more. I want to be humbled over and over again. So I guess that would be the biggest surprise.
That's a beautiful reflection on kind of what you've achieved, and also how to look at your achievements in a bigger scale, and not necessarily on something that comes now and then, because it's you've built something that needed the time to expand the way it did. And it wasn't overnight, right? So that's really the beauty of being consistent and having a passion to work towards. That's really beautiful. Thank you for that. I want to ask you before we close, what is, looking back, is there anything that you do differently?
I mean, of course, I can look back and think about things I could do differently, but then I also think if I have not done them that way, even the mistakes, I would not have learned. I would not be the person I am today. So, I mean, there are things I can talk about, in terms of coming to Norway was one of the hardest, moves in my life. I struggled to integrate into Norway. And I wish I had stayed in the UK, because I would not have been clinically depressed for 6 months of my life, which was an awful period. But do I want to go take that back? No, because I feel like it has shaped me to the person that I am today. It has given me more perspectives in, how, it's giving me more perspective, and I like who I am today. And I think I am made up of the glorious and the shameful and the painful moments that I don't want to take any of it back. So I'd probably do it exactly the same.
That's very beautiful. That's very beautiful. Yes, thank you, Chisom. This was a great chat. I'm, as I told you, I'm already a fan, so I feel like I just got to know more about you, and also understand more about your drivers, which is really great to hear. And I hope that our audience got a lot of advice on how to look at your life and really work towards something that you're passionate about, while you also build that career that you dream of, because it is possible, but of course it is a balancing act. That's one of the main takeaways, and it requires hard work. So it is something that we need to highlight as well. And I want to go now to the final 5 fire questions. So this is the last part of our interview, where you will share with us an answer on your preferred 5 categories. So the first one is, what is one book you think everyone should read?
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Nice. Yes. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Yeah, this one I struggle with. if something happens around you and you don't agree with it and you don't say anything, it means you agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Who is your role model?
My mother. My mother, she's unique. She's hectic. She's inspirational in the best way possible. She's chaotic, but she has defied odds. She has built empires, and she has shown me everything and more that is possible. And I am so grateful to have her.
Very beautiful. Very beautiful. If you were to have another career, and I know this question is a bit tricky for you because you could probably have many careers even now, what would you choose to do?
I'd be a lawyer.
A lawyer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was always told from childhood that I could be a lawyer because of, like my passion and how I can argue for things endlessly. But yeah, I'd be a lawyer. I think I'd probably want to do something around, justice law, like creating, trying to find. Yeah, I'd be a lawyer.
Yes, and that's a full circle to how I introduced you. So I think that fits very well into what we've shared about you. Okay, and the last question is, if you could change places with someone for a day or for longer, who would it be and why?
I really like Oprah.
I understand.
I
understand.
I'd like to see what it is to live in her shoes.
Yeah.
I think what she's created, from where she's come from, and how she shows up in the world. Yeah, I'd like to pick her brains and understand, her journey. And I think, for why Oprah and my mother have always been professional, more role models for me. But in some degrees, of course, I don't know Oprah personally. From what I see, also like personal role model, just for the fact that they defy odds and they create spaces for themselves and for others. And they manage to do it with kindness and humility. I'd like to pick her brains.
Yes, that's a good one. Thank you so much, Chisom. I hope you've had the fun and a good interview with me today. I'm very thankful that you took the time, and I want to say really thank you for all of your work, but also for joining Family Podcast today. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this and for creating this space for, real and authentic conversations. I think they're so needed, and it's just a privilege to be invited. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chisom. I hope you've all enjoyed this interview, and stay tuned for more updates with inspiring female role models. Hello. Before we go, we want to say thank you for listening and thank you for supporting Family Podcast. At the same time, we want to bring to your attention that as we are expanding our community, we want you to be aware of some of the ways that you can support us. You can promote our podcast and our interviews within your organization and ask whether your company can become a partner with us. We host events, both networking events and company collaborations, every quarter, and we are looking to expand our network and to bring the family community and spirit to more organizations. We also create podcast packages for interviews of role models from across the world. Lastly, we are planning a new career conference in 2024, so if you are interested in supporting us and you are based in Copenhagen or in Denmark, you can reach out to us at hello@femleadpodcast.com, and we can share some of the sponsorship packages we've prepared for you to become a partner at our next Career Breakthrough Conference. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and stay tuned for more inspiring content from FemLead Podcast.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of FemLead Podcast. Share the news with your friends and follow us on social media at FemLead Podcast everywhere.